Hi, I'm Mark Tross. Welcome to Cross Culture New Mexico. We're continuing in our series on Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, also known as the Feast of Dedication. Today we're going to be in the Apocrypha books of 1st and 2nd Maccabee. Now, beginning in 1st Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 54, we're going to read this. On the 15th day of the month of Kislev, in the year 145, King Antiochus set up the awful horror on the altar of the temple, and pagan altars were built in the towns throughout Judea. Pagan sacrifices were offered in front of houses and in the streets. Any books of the law which were found were torn up and burned. Remind you of the time of Adolf Hitler. And anyone who was caught with a copy of the sacred books or who obeyed the law was put to death by order of the king. Month after month, these wicked men used their power against the Israelites caught in the towns. Also in 1st Maccabees chapter 4, beginning in verse 36, Judas and his brothers said, "Now that our enemies have been defeated, let's go to Jerusalem to purify the temple and rededicate it." So the whole army was assembled and went up to Mount Zion. There they found the temple abandoned, the altar profaned, the gates burned down, the courtyards grown up in a forest of weeds, and the priest's room torn down. In their sorrow they tore their clothes, cried loudly, threw ashes on their heads, and fell face down on the ground. When the signal was given on the trumpets, everyone cried out to the Lord. Then Judas ordered some of his soldiers to attack the men in the fort while he purified the temple. He chose some priests who were qualified and who were devoted to the law. They purified the temple and took the stones that had been defiled and put them in an unclean place. They discussed what should be done with the altar of burnt offerings, which had been desecrated by the Gentiles, and decided to tear it down so that it would not stand there as a monument to their shame. So they tore down the altar and put the stones in the suitable place on the temple hill, where they were to be kept until a prophet should appear and decide what to do with them. Then they took uncut stones, as the law of Moses required, and built a new altar like the old one. They repaired the temple inside and out and dedicated its courtyards. They made new utensils for worship and brought the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the table for the bread into the temple. They burned incense on the altar and lit the lamps on the lampstand, and there was light in the temple. They placed the loaves of bread on the table, hung the curtains, and completed all the work. The 25th day of this 9th month, the month of Kislev, in the year 148, was the anniversary of the day the Gentiles had desecrated the altar. On that day a sacrifice was offered on the new altar in accordance with the law of Moses. The new altar was dedicated, and hymns were sung to the accompaniment of harps, lutes, and cymbals. All the people bowed down with their faces to the ground and worshipped and praised the Lord for giving them victory. For 8 days they celebrated the rededication of the altar with great joy and brought burnt offerings and offered fellowship offerings and thank offerings. They decorated the front of the temple with gold crowns and shields, built the gates and the priest rooms, and put doors on them. Now that the Jews had removed the shame which the Gentiles had brought, they held a great celebration. Then Judas, his brothers, and the entire community of Israel decreed that the rededication of the altar should be celebrated with a festival of joy and gladness at the same time each year, beginning on, listen to this, the 25th of the month of Kislev, and lasting for 8 days. Next time, we'll be reading out of 2nd Maccabees. Be sure to join us. I'm your host, Mark Tross. Join us online, Facebook, Twitter. Follow us, share our Facebook pages, like our posts, and connect with us on MySpace, LinkedIn, and other social networks. Till next time, check out our website, crossculturenm.weebly.com, and happy Hanukkah.